talked about Bubba McDowell, the strong safety, how well he has played this year. Traditional as a defensive back that will take some chances. He'll get burned from time to time, but he'll make a lot of plays, as he did right there on Thurman Thomas in the right flat.
3rd down and 9 for Buffalo from their own 48-yard line. Out of a shotgun formation. Reich has it. Back to pass. Throws it out to the right, and the pass is caught and then intercepted. It's intercepted on the far sideline, and taking it all the way down is Bubba McDowell for a touchdown. Bubba McDowell for a touchdown, and that may be the final nail.
It is.
In the Buffalo coffin, it was tipped off the hand of Keith McKellar.
In Buffalo, New York, this game is known as the comeback. In Houston, it's referred to as the choke. The Houston Oilers led 35-3 2 minutes into the second half. 6 minutes and 52 seconds later, the lead was cut from 32 points to just 4. With 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, it was the Oilers who needed a comeback of their own. Just 6 plays into overtime, Houston's season was over. How did the Oilers allow the largest comeback in NFL history? What decisions led to their collapse, and how did their mindset allow their 32-point lead to melt away so quickly? Today we're going to look at 35-3, this time from the Oilers' perspective. Let's get the sponsor of the vid right out of the way. Do you work out? You want to eat healthy? Well, for that, you're going to need protein. And guess what has a lot of protein in it? That's right, meat. But it's time to graduate from eating meat on styrofoam trays and consume it more responsibly without having to get out of your house to do it. For that, there's Porter Road, your trusted online butcher shop that was started by Chris and James, who had a mission to fix the broken food system. And for the last 10 years, they fine-tuned the process to build a more sustainable system for the planet without using added hormones or antibiotics. And all this meat is dry aged and hand cut, and let me tell you, it tastes amazing. You can shop Porter Road just like you were at a butcher shop and choose curated bundles that always ship for free. There's no commitment and you control the frequency. So after this video, head on over to porterroad.com/5 points and get $20 off your first order of $100 or more. Again, that's porterroad.com/5 points from the link below. That's porterroad.com/5 points. Spelled out like the words 5 points. The Oilers were 2 minutes away from the AFC Championship game to face the Bills. The ball was at Denver's 1-yard line. Warren Moon paced the sideline. Too much time. The Oilers forced 4th down. One stop, and they would be moving on.
But only 2 corners, Charlie. Elway scrambles, throws, has a man. They got it. It's Johnson down the sideline.
The Oilers' 1991 season was over, but their crushing defeat didn't keep them from a rebound the season after. Led by head coach Jack Pardee, the Oilers finished top 10 in offense and defense. 36-year-old quarterback Warren Moon was injured for 6 games, but averaged nearly 2 touchdown passes a game, throwing to a 4-headed wide receiver attack led by Ernest Givens, Webster Slaughter, Curtis Duncan, and Haywood Jeffries. The Oilers were just as potent on the ground. Lorenzo White averaged 4.6 yards per carry, while their opportunistic defense complemented Houston's famous run-and-shoot offense. The Oilers won 9 of their first 15 games in 1992, but needed a victory in Week 17 to secure a wild-card berth. In do-or-die mode, the Oilers beat the Bills 27-3, setting up a playoff rematch in Rich Stadium 1 week later. This time, Buffalo had a new starting quarterback. Future Hall of Famer Jim Kelly was injured in the first game against the Oilers, straining ligaments in his knee. Kelly was relieved by longtime backup Frank Reich. In the first matchup, the Oilers intercepted Reich twice and kept him out of the end zone. Houston had denied Buffalo of a first-round bye, a division victory, and their franchise quarterback. But like everything in this story, payback would come quickly. The ancient Greeks had a word for excessive confidence in oneself: hubris. Hubris was said to anger the gods, and anyone who succumbed to such arrogance would be punished by Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. Coming off of a 24-point win, Houston was ready to do it again. Oilers running back Spencer Tillman said, "We were jacked up about it because there's nothing more encouraging for a team. Dominate one team one week and then ultimately know you're going to play that team again. It's a tremendous confidence booster." The Oilers had reason to be confident, even arrogant. The Bills were also playing without All-Pro linebacker Cornelius Bennett, softening up Buffalo's 14th ranked defense. Even more, they were granted a gift from the football gods. The Oilers, who played in the climate-controlled Astrodome, were gifted a 41-degree day in Buffalo, unseasonably warm for a January day in western New York.
Beautiful day out here today. Can't get any better than this.
The only problem, the Buffalo winds were soaring up to 25 miles per hour. Houston's run-and-shoot offense was predicated on the vertical pass, and for the first and third quarters, the Oilers would have Buffalo's mighty wind in their face. The Oilers' base formation featured 10 personnel, which is to say 1 running back, 4 wide receivers, and 0 tight ends on the field. A dominant offensive line headlined by future Hall of Famers Mike Munchak and Bruce Matthews gave Warren Moon ample time to hold on to the ball and let vertical routes develop down the field. On their first drive of the game, it became abundantly clear that the offense would not be stopped. On the first third down of the game, Moon threw a rope to wide receiver Haywood Jeffries. Houston was stuck with a 4th and 2 later in the drive, but their coaches were adamant that their opening drive would result in a touchdown. I was a little skeptical because that's not like Jack Pardee to take chances like that, Jeffries said. Offensive coordinator Kevin Gilbride dialed up the perfect play to counter Buffalo's interior pressure. Lorenzo White took the ball off the left side and picked up a hard-fought first down. A handful of plays later, Jeffries was in the end zone. Houston's defense allowed a field goal on the subsequent drive. It was the only score they would allow until the third quarter. And when Warren Moon got the ball back, the floodgates opened.
Puts it up, Jeffries comes down and has the lead. And here is White. Little play action fake in the end zone. Touchdown. Across the motion. 2 seconds of the play clock. Rizzo's deep. And it is caught. What a catch by Curtis Duncan. Moon goes deep. Touchdown, Houston. Haywood Jeffries with his 2nd touchdown of the game.
The Oilers were a week removed from beating the Bills 27-3. Before the first half of this game had even concluded, they had beat that mark, taking a commanding 28-3 lead. All week, the Oilers heard why they couldn't repeat that performance. Kevin Gilbride was happy to shut up the naysayers. They were a soft dome team, running an offense that wouldn't translate to a cold weather playoff game. With so many of the factors that people say will preclude or prevent us from playing well, such as being away in the cold weather, we are playing as good a game as you can possibly play. Gilbride was correct, and their perfect first half was capped off by a gorgeous touchdown to Jeffries that looked like the nail in the coffin. At halftime, Houston beat writers began making non-refundable flights for the next playoff game.
Everybody calls someone at halftime. And all we did as a coaching staff and players, let's keep the high down to a minimal. But, that was tough.
Just a couple minutes into the second half, Houston's high would reach its peak.
White goes far side. This is intercepted. And down the far sideline is Bubba McDowell. And he will score.
The offense had spent the first half scoring, and now the defense had gotten one of their own, capitalizing on a drop by Keith McKellar. Rich Stadium had gone silent. Fans began to leave the game en masse. The Oilers sideline was ready to book their tickets to Pittsburgh.
I'm like, okay, we got this game. We got this game. This game is over.
However, not everyone was ready to celebrate.
Still looking a bit grim, even with that margin.
Perhaps Jack Pardee saw what was coming. On the ensuing kickoff, the football gods would have their revenge on the Houston Oilers. Houston's plan was to execute a squib kick, one that couldn't be knocked down in the high winds. But when Al Del Greco kicked, the wind took possession of the ball and pushed it towards a Buffalo special teamer, leaving a mad scramble for the ball. Buffalo had it at the 50. The Bills had been gifted a new life, but on their first play after the kick, they almost gave it back. Were the gods favoring the Bills, or were the Oilers beginning to lose their grip? When Eddie Robinson missed an easy interception, Bubba McDowell slowed down and allowed the crucial completion. As Houston's mistakes began snowballing, hardly anyone noticed they had caught another huge break. Buffalo's all-pro running back Thurman Thomas had left the game with a hip injury. However, his backup, Kenneth Davis, didn't miss a beat.
Here is Davis, heads for the corner, he makes it.
The Oilers' onslaught had officially ended. The floodgates had been closed. And now, it was Buffalo's turn. A bad bounce of the ball had set up the Bills with a short field. Another one would deny Houston an offensive possession. Oilers linebacker Rick Graft had a shot at the ball, but it had been jarred loose by Mark Pike. The ball went back to the kicker, Steve Christie. Warren Moon, who hadn't touched the ball since the second quarter, would remain on the bench. He and the Oilers' offense had cooled off. Frank Reich was just heating up.
Right to throw. Down the side, all alone. Beebe scores.
This was absolutely blown coverage, leaving Don Beebe wide open.
Had Jerry and I communicated better on that particular play, it would have never happened. He would have never been alone by himself back there.
The confusion in the Oilers' secondary wasn't the only reason the touchdown shouldn't have happened. As soon as Beebe caught the ball, the sideline official should have thrown a flag for illegal touching. Prior to the 1992 season, the NFL had eliminated replay review, meaning the touchdown would stand. The Oilers, so confident coming out of the half, were now unable to shake off 4 bad breaks in a row. The botched squib kick, the missed interception, the onside kick, and the missed illegal touching.
I remember sitting on the bench with David Williams, and you look at the guy and you don't want to say it, but that doubt creeps in because it's happened so many times before about here we go again.
Pretty soon, doubt would turn to panic.
Montgomery gets his first kick away. It takes the Buffalo back. And you saw Jim Kelly on the sideline happier than earlier. Here's the screen, right side, needs a run, gets it. First down to Kenneth Davis. 2 guys, first down at the 26. White House and the extra point is good.
Charlie Jones said it all. This was a fever dream to the viewing public. But for the Houston Oilers and their fans, it was a nightmare unfolding before their very eyes. In less than 7 minutes, the 32-point lead had shrunk to just 4. Even the simplest tasks became impossible for the Oilers. Houston had finally caught a break. A roughing the passer call against Bruce Smith had wiped out a Warren Moon interception and had set up Houston in field goal range. But suddenly, the air began to dampen and the ball became slick. Al Del Greco lined up for a chip shot from 32 yards, but he never even got to swing his leg. The ball slipped through holder Greg Montgomery's fingers. Del Greco had his head slammed on the turf and suffered a concussion. Meanwhile, the Oilers were back on their heels, and their defense had no answers against a backup quarterback and a backup running back. With the ball in Houston territory once again, they could at least hold the Bills to 3 points and run the clock out to win the game. But Buffalo wasn't interested in a field goal.
Right to throw, end zone, touchdown.
On the play that cost them the lead, a lead that they had held since the first drive of the game, there was hardly a good explanation for why the defense had let Reed into the end zone for a third time. Free safety Marcus Robinson was in perfect position to make the play, maybe even intercept Reich's pass, but he froze. Now with 3:08 left in the game, it was the Oilers who needed a comeback of their own. And when it was time to reverse their own bad fortune, Warren Moon mustered up a drive to potentially win the game in regulation. Moon didn't try to cut through the wind and the rain, he threw short passes, and it was working. Houston had 3rd and 5 from the 12. Moon scrambled and came up short. Some Oilers wanted to see a more aggressive mindset.
It was the most conservative 3 plays that has ever been called in football.
Because of his concussion earlier in the game, Al Del Greco didn't remember that first misstep. But this time, Montgomery got the ball down, and Del Greco pushed it through the uprights. The game was headed to sudden death overtime.
It is a tail.
It's a tail.
Take this in. We'll defend this. Houston wins the toss. They will receive.
And you can see.
When Steve Christie kicked the game-winning field goal 3 minutes and 2 seconds into overtime, it was the result of one final mistake by the Oilers. Rather than kick off with the wind at their backs, Houston elected to receive with the wind blowing in their face. 3 plays later, Moon was intercepted by Nate Odoms. It was Moon's 50th pass of the game, the 56th time he had dropped back. By comparison, the Oilers had run the ball just 20 times in a game they led for the majority it was being broadcast. Buffalo won the game, but the Oilers were not beaten by the Bills. They were defeated by themselves. The author Will Durant once said that a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself within. The same can be said about the Houston Oilers and their 32-point lead in Buffalo. They fell victim to arrogance, overconfidence, and hubris. 6 straight dominant quarters had softened the Oilers, taken away their edge, made them susceptible to mistakes. And when those mistakes began to snowball, the Oilers lacked the fortitude to take a punch and get back up.
So you really can't say no next year, I don't know what's going on. It's as simple as that. We choked. We choked as a team. We choked as management. Everyone in this organization just choked.
History repeated itself a year later when the Oilers lost a 3rd straight heartbreaker in the playoffs, this time to Joe Montana and the Kansas City Chiefs. Warren Moon was traded after their loss, and the team fell from 12-4 in 1993 to just 2-14 in 1994. Jack Pardee was fired, their exceptional wide receiver group was broken up, and their 2 coordinators couldn't work together without throwing punches. By 1997, the team had moved to Tennessee. The Houston Oilers were no more. The lights were still on at Rich Stadium, but you can turn them out in the Astrodome. The gods had spoken.
For the win.
Only 50% this season from between 30 and 40, as you saw.
It is right